This conference will now be recorded.
Right. Usually, Scrum Master will be a servant leader in most of the cases because people usually ask like, where is project manager in Agile and all that. So there is no concept of project manager in Agile because if you take about project manager as a role, project manager will have some characteristics like he'll be the authority for the project. So he'll be the one who is taking responsibility for on the whole project and all that. So this is how it was. But whereas in agile environment, you don't see any authority or responsibility will be held only for one person. So why most of the companies tend towards implementing agile transformation? So remember again one thing I would like to add this point, valid point here. Agile transformation is not confined only for a project you're developing. Remember, Kajal, Lensley, and Nirja. Agile transformation or agile implementation is a process is not confined only for project development. What are the projects we are developing? It's not only that. Agile transformation will be implemented across enterprises of the organization. This is what we call it as enterprise transformation. In the large scale, that is what we call it as scaled agile framework, SAFe. So there is no authority will be given for a particular individual. Responsibility will be on everyone's shoulders. Everybody responsible, everybody are accountable for the deed what they have completed so far. That's how generally agile works. The reason why every business owner or every company wants to implement, because of course implementation end of the day practical viabilities were different. We'll discuss about that later. But why they want to implement agile environment? Because they want everyone to make accountable and responsible. Otherwise, what happened? For example, we are all 4 members belongs to a project. Assume that if we are working on waterfall model, I'll give you a best example to you so that will be understood very well. So assume that we are all 4 members working on project waterfall model using waterfall model. Right, everybody have their own respective expertise, like one person is into user interfaces, one person is into coding, design, testing, all that kind of stuff. So there will be no responsibility of the whole project, because if I am trying to escape from my duties, right, I can simply blame someone that I have to get that work from them without getting anything. I cannot go myself. So nobody are ready to take accountability because nobody is responsible here. End of the day, responsibility will be on the shoulders of a project manager. Of course, business analyst will be there in between, but business analyst is only confined towards business requirements and all. He don't see anything apart. But if that was the case, what will happen? Because end of the day, we are all working for the project, so there is no accountability. Why? Because we are not responsible for anything, because responsibility is on the shoulder of a project manager. He is the one who is taking that. So usually human tendency, it's not something like this person and that person. Usually human tendency, people try to avoid, right? People try to avoid that risk. People try to transfer the risk to someone if it is not, if it affects us, right? So that is how it is. So in agile, we are making everyone accountable, because we need to understand that part in agile environment, that there is no authority process in agile environment. Scrum masters, scrum team members, everybody are equal and one the same. You don't see any kind of changes or disparities among these people. Even though scrum master is responsible to manage scrum team, it is to the extent of management. It is not to the extent of authority. I'll give you a best example. I hope I have given earlier also, because we used to conduct daily scrum meetings, as I told you, right? This is what we call it as scrum meetings or daily scrum. So when we are conducting daily scrum meetings, in some occasions because regular meeting will be conducted every day, 15 minutes of time. There are some situations where we come across that few people won't attend for Scrum meetings. They don't attend. So they may miss sometimes, right? So that discipline and all, everything will be missed from them. Now, being a servant leader, a Scrum Master, this is our responsibility and duty to speak with them personally, discussing about the kind of problem they were facing, what kind of problem and all that. If we feel that because of this indiscipline, because assume that they're working on, they're fine at work, but as far as the Scrum meetings is concerned, they are not attending. That's only the thing. Understand the difference. That he's discharging his duties well, but as far as the Scrum meetings is concerned, he's not attending. But even though he is performing well, because of his absence, there are some important decisions. What will be taken will be missed out by that person, so that valuable contribution of that individual is missing in the team, right? So which will impact on the motivation towards completion of the project on time in the team itself. So that what usually being a Scrum Master do, Scrum Master try to transfer the kind of responsibilities what given. If this is the process which is continuing forever, right? So for regular intervals, I'm saying, not in the beginning. Scrum Master usually transfer the work to the rest of the people, remaining people, and if he's out of his reach, this decision will be escalated to the management team. That's it. Scrum Master never takes any kind of disciplinary action on this. Understood, Lindsay, Kajal, Neeraj? Clear or not?
Yes. Yeah, understood. Yeah. You're just a facilitator or servant leader, basically.
So a Scrum Master will act to manage Scrum team, because Scrum team members full of technical team, these people can complete the task. That's not a problem, because they may be technically sound to complete. But here the point is, you need to complete on time. That is what is required. So for that, you need to have an approach. See, we may be good in studies, but end of the day, how an academic track record will be evaluated? Academic track record will be evaluated based on the percentage of the marks which that respective individual has got in the examination. Do you agree or not? Now, the examination will have some timelines. For example, 45 minutes, right? Or 1 hour, 1.5 hour, or 2 hours. Exam will be there. Within the 2 hours time, whoever has performed well will be given that advantage, right? Will be having the advantage, and they'll be considered that academically this person has performed well, right? So this is how generally we elevate. Do you agree or not, Kajal, Neeraja, Lindsay? Right or not?
Yeah,
So
agree.
Yeah, yeah.
it is nothing to do with how you are performing in the class. Obviously, you may be a topper in the class, but end of the day, performance evaluation based upon the exam, based on the exam what you have attended and how much marks you have attained. So there is no second thought in this. There is no corrections possible in this, right? So when the examination is done, it's done. So there is no point again for a review. So for whatsoever reason, because how you have performed on that particular time is important. The same way, the major responsibility, underlying responsibility being a Scrum Master is this because this point you don't see on screen. You don't see on screen. This is all something comes in back of yours, your abilities and all that. This is all it is invisible. I can say it is not visible. It is invisible. The invisible part is that people are good at their technical skills, but they are continuously failing in reaching the targets of completing work on time. Doesn't mean that they are not technically sound, they are not performing well. They are performing well, but they are not completing, they are failing to complete the task on time. So what kind of measures to be taken to make them to complete work on time? So for that, what you have to see the stress management levels, what that individual can carry, because some people are technically strong, but they fail in managing their stress, right? So if there are some stressful situations come across, these people will raise their hands, right? So they cannot manage all that. Some people technically may not be strong as when you are comparing with other person, so they know how to manage their stress levels, they know how to manage their work schedules and all that. So again here behavioral traits plays a vital and important role, right? How that individual behaves, right? How the individual performs, right? So all that will be taking into an account. The reason why we being a, coming to myself as an example, if you take being an agile coach, what usually I do is this. On top of it, as a part of Scrum Masters and all that, on top of it, being an agile coach, what we do is this: the behavioral traits. As I told you, and the last time also I told you, you may be good at playing football, but as long as you will be appreciated, as long as you are following the basic principles and rules of football, right? So without following any rules and regulations, if even though you are performing well, you will not be considered as a professional player. Do you agree or not? So why coach is required? Football coach is required. Football coach will motivate 24/7 the team to perform this that game, perform well, along with following the principles of the football what they have to follow, right or not? So then only they'll be elevated, then only recognition will be given to them, otherwise not. Understand? Clear? Nirja, Kajal, and see, agree or not?
Yeah,
So
agree.
here
Yes, sir.
well how well the how well the performance of people, it's been specifically calculating based upon the behavioral traits, based upon the stress management levels. All these were matters. So being a Scrum Master, we continuously monitor all that, along with the help of Scrum Agile coach or something of that sort, that we have to monitor, that we have to see who is capable of what, how much timelines are we providing to them. So are they really capable enough to complete the task or not? So what will be the velocity of the project, velocity of work? So all that responsibility will be held towards Scrum Master. Clear now? I think, hope you understood.
Yeah, that's pretty clear. Thanks.
1 minute, I am sharing the screen. You're able to view the screen, right? Right.
It's
Okay.
loading. Now we can see it.
Yeah, you could see here, right? Now you
Yeah.
can see, right? Right. So what we have completed so far about user stories. What is user stories all about? We have completed so far. Followed by the user story, we have discussed about acceptance criteria as well, right? What is acceptance criteria? All that, right? So that is that is what we have discussed so far. And we are about to start the sprint planning, because assume that there were user stories which was already written. So whatever the user stories were written and all that, for that story point has given, right? Story points are story points, because story points based on the two factors, as I told you, right? Business value and complexity. Based on two things, story points will be given for each and every user story, which is for sure. So before you're going to conduct a sprint planning, right? So we must be knowing about what are all the different Scrum artifacts which are required for an agile team to follow it. It is nothing to do with the role of a Scrum Master, but being a Scrum Master or a person who will be managing the project, so one must be knowing about what are the different Scrum artifacts to be followed. Usually these Scrum artifacts, the first thing is product backlog, as I already mentioned you earlier, right? So product backlog, this is what usually a repository where we put all the user stories and all everything under one roof, right? So this is what generally We call it as a product backlog. This is all comes under Scrum artifacts. Next will be called as sprint backlog. Sprint backlog doesn't mean whatever the kind of sprints you are dividing, right? Whatever the kind of sprints you are about to complete with, right? So whatever the sprints you are planning to work on, so what are the sprints you are creating, right? What kind of timelines are you going to provide under sprint backlog? All these things, sprints, all these things comes under sprint backlog. Product backlog is a repository to store user stories. Sprint backlog, I can say in simple terms, is a repository to store sprints, right? So this is what it is. Next is product increment. This is also another important element we need to understand it. Product increment. So what is meant by product increment? Product increment doesn't mean the kind of potentiality of that particular product. Whatever the product we have taken, we have to understand, we have to identify what is the potentiality that particular product has, right? What is the potentiality that product consists of? That we have to evaluate end of the day, because each and every sprint, whatever the sprints are we going to complete with, so in that sprint, we have to evaluate and we have to understand what will be the potentiality of that particular product is all about. Is there any possibility for us to add on any kind of increments into the existing thing? Because this is what usually customer expects. Because there is an existing product wherein he may be expecting you to add some new things every time into that. This is what we call it as product increment is all about. So these are the major things we have to be focused more on. This is also another important element we need to be focused more on. So apart from that, there is another part we call it as values of Scrum. This is also will be there. Scrum values means what will be the value of Scrum is what being an agile team, I mean to say, right? As an agile team, we must be focused more on, because as I told you, there are some pillars we have to be followed. It's a discipline. Agile is a discipline, as I told, because it's a mindset. End of the day, people should be on the same track, wherein people must confirm themselves that this responsibility is individual, is a group responsibility, and we are committed to take credit. Either it is a positive or minus, that credit will goes to the team. That is how generally the mindset of each and every agile team member should consist of. Usually, because usually in human tendency that we don't try to give our credits to anyone, right? Usually this is how the mindset of any individual, right, across world, right, it happens. Because whereas in agile never entertains or never encourages any individual performances and never recognizes individual performances. That's the reason why there are some Scrum values which has been incorporated in Agile, which starts with commitment. Person should be committed while performing their task. This is something very much important for any Scrum member to work with, Agile member and all that. Commitment is the ultimate quality one must absorb. Next, apart from commitment, the next was focus, because people should be so focused to complete that particular task, because we are not thinking about the next sprint. Why I am talking about the focus? Because we have to be focused on the particular sprint whichever is given to us, and we are not focusing on the next work, or we are not thinking about the past work. We are thinking only on the present work which is being given to us, and how best quality added performances should be given to that particular work has to be focused by each and every team member. This is what we call it as focus transfer. Next, openness is also something important in agile environment. Openness, because open to discuss, because each and every person is what we called each and every person should be open for discussion, because in regular traditional model, if you see, there is no because if you are a team member, for example, if you are a developer or someone, you are not into decision making, right? You will not be into decision making. Whatever the decision making given by the team and all that, so that you have to follow it. So there is no other chance for your part. But whereas here itself is concerned, each and every person's value, each and every person's words, each and every person's uh, vision, or as well as their ideas will be taken into an account, because each and every Scrum team member is responsible for the deeds whichever is happening on the respective sprint. So that openness is something required, followed by this respecting the values as well as the ideas of each and every individual among groups is something is also required. Apart from that, courage. This is also another important, because you need to complete the task. You need to have that ability called as I can, right? So that is what usually. So these are the usually the Scrum values, followed by the artifacts which being a team members we have to be good with. Understand? Clear? Neerja, Lindsay, Kajal, are you clear or not?
Yes. Yes,
Right.
sir.
Yeah, it's clear.
Now we are starting about sprint planning. What is sprint planning is all about? Why do we require sprint planning to be done? So normally sprint planning nothing but to make sure the team is prepared to get the right things done in every sprint. Remember, sprint planning is a continuous process which will never stop. As long as the product or a product continues, the sprint planning will be continued forever. Sprint planning is an initial process, will be done by the, the Scrum Master or a Scrum team members and all. Everybody will be involving product owner. With the help of product owner support, sprint planning will be done. Sprint planning is a continuous process which you never see any kind of stoppage in this, because sprint planning, every sprint, whenever you have started sprint planning has to be initiated. Means whatever the process are we going to discuss now, so this is a continuous process as long as you are starting a new sprint. Okay, so there you don't see any kind of differences, because this is not something relating to the whole product. Remember that point well. For example, when we are talking about a product, something you're developing, in that product, what are the particular feature relating to the epic and all, what are the user stories we have written? For those user stories, you are responsible with. Means whatever the user stories you are keeping on the sprint, you are trying to provide value for that. You are focusing only on those particular user stories which were there in the sprint. So whenever there is a new sprint started, again the sprint planning and all everything will be conducted as follows. Right now in the sprint planning, there are some steps we have to follow. Steps to follow when you are conducting a sprint planning, because this is what usually when you go for an interviews, people may ask you, right? What is that you are going to do with respect to the sprint planning, right? Being a Scrum Master, what is your responsibility and how you guys are, how you people, not, it's not how being a Scrum Master, how you people are moving in sprint planning and all that, right? So usually in the beginning of the sprint planning, the first step to be taken into consideration is Scrum meeting happens at the beginning of a new sprint and is designed for the product owner and development team. I mean to say Scrum team I'm talking about, right? Development team to meet and review the prioritized product backlog. This is what the first step we do in sprint planning, because before you're going to start the sprint, being team members, what we need to follow here is you need to make sure you have to conduct a scrum meeting. Remember here there are different meetings will be conducted here. Daily scrum meetings were different because daily scrum meetings you are conducting every day for about 15 minutes of time. That is different. Second, if there is a change happens in the scope, for example, there was a scope which was defined for that sprint, which you have already started with. Now there is need wherein you come across to change some kind of scope which was already decided and implementing by you. Now the kind of meetings you're going to conduct would be different. Don't connect regular daily scrum meetings with these meetings, because these meetings were irregular, right? So these meetings are nothing to do with daily scrum meetings. Daily scrum meetings will conduct as separate and other meetings will be conducted as separate. That's the reason why in Agile, most of the time in real-time environment, I'm saying most of the times rather than working, attending meetings will be more. I can say, for example, if there are 10 hours of work, in the 10 hours at least worst to worst 4 to 5 hours there will be meetings every day in Agile. This is in reality I'm saying, right? Rather than working, everything is on meetings. Why? Because there will be no documentation we follow in Agile, right? So there is, of course, there is an approach we follow. Whatever the discussions are we going on, whatever are we deciding and all everything. So based on the decision or based on the conclusion what we had, implementation will be taken place. So there will be a continuous meetings will be conducted. So among all that, there is one kind of meeting happens, right, in the beginning of the new sprint. Where in this beginning, usually product owner will also be attending along with other team members, because product owner will also be there here, because product owner is a person who will be uh, allocating us the user stories as well as the importances, what exactly value to be given to the existing product and all existing user stories and all will be informed or will be given by the product owner usually. Now in this scrum team, usually product owner as well as development team will be there along with Scrum Master, of course, Scrum Master and all that. We'll be reviewing the prioritizing of the product backlog. This is what we do it. So once we do, usually there is the next step is that this is in continuation. I'm saying there is nothing discussions followed by negotiations will be taken place so that we finalize what is important at this point in time to start, right? So this is what usually we do in sprint planning, right? So based on the scrum meeting, the importance of scrum meeting is to discuss and finalize and negotiate what are all is required and what are all should be implemented to start with. So once we have negotiated, once we have discussed, there must be a sprint goal we have to create with, because this is something very much important we need to see with, because we have to create a sprint goal. See, product goal is different, sprint goal is different, because sprint goal is only confined to that particular sprint. Whatever the sprint are you going to create, that sprint goal is only confined to the particular sprint. Why? Because which work has to be taken into an account, which work has to be which work can be completed and which can be shippable, to the customer, right? Or else which product, which work can be shippable for increments and all that. So where there is a possibility that wherein you need to add some new increments into the existing thing. So those evaluation has to be done. So each and every sprint must be having some goal. Sprint goal is something very much essential and important in sprint planning, because what finally you are trying to achieve out of the sprint once you have completed, that is what generally we have to make sure that whatever the work we are going to do, everything, the sprint goal and all, everything has to be created by the Scrum team members followed by the Scrum Master. But make sure whenever you're going to create the sprint or whenever you're creating the sprint goal, being a Scrum team and Scrum Master, I mean to say, right? Whenever you are going to create a sprint goal and sprint goal with the help of Scrum team and Scrum Master, make sure product owner has to provide us all the required information, because product owner is the person who will be responsible to provide all the required as necessary user stories, followed by user story. Every user story must be accompanied with acceptance criteria, right? Whatever the necessary information and all, everything, make sure that will be given by the product owner, because product owner is the person who will be providing us all the information to us. This is what we need to make sure from the product owner. Okay, so once the sprint goal has created, now you have to define and you have to take user stories, and uh, you have to track, means you have to what we called uh, uh, what I can say, based on the user story length and as well as the complexity, you have to divide these user stories into tasks. Means user stories will be divided into, so task goal has to be created first. You have to create a sprint goal by both the Scrum team and as well as Scrum Master. Sprint goal and all creation will be done. So make sure whenever you are creating sprint goal, you need to have the necessary information with you. So that is first. After that, what we have to do is, is it possible for us to reach that sprint goal or not? In order to do that, what is required? Whatever the existing user stories, those has to be divided into tasks. For example, as I mentioned, there is a login page. Right? Assume that creation of login page is the task, is the user story we are working on. So when you are working on that particular user story, are we going to allocate creation of user story, creation of the login page will be assigned to a one person? Do we do that? Lindsay?
No, it can't be assigned to one person.
Right? Are we assigning creation of login page only is this, if that is the user story, are we giving the same, are we giving the single user story for one person? Are we giving it, or are we simplifying it? We are
You're dividing
simplifying.
it into tasks, yeah.
We are simplifying. So what you are doing, you are simplifying and you are dividing all these into tasks. Task means for that particular work. For example, Lindsay is good at database designing. She will be given responsibility of designing the databases and all that. Now, maybe Neeraja is good at creating user interfaces of the project. So that login page user interfaces responsibility will be given to Neeraja. Wherein, for example, Kajal is there. Whatever the work these people have completed, make sure testing has to be taken care of by Kajal. right? So testing task as well as the implementation as well as testing, assume that, right? Because we have only 3-4 people. So implementation as well as testing task is being taken care of by the Kajal. So what you're doing now, there is a user story. There is a user story. The user story has given some user story points we have given, right? Either it will be 1, 2, 3, or so on, whatever it is. Story points have been given for that particular user story. Based on that particular user story value or user story points, that user story again you are dividing into multiple tasks, different tasks and all, everything you are dividing. Understood, right? So means user interface designs being given to one person, database design is given for one person, as well as testing will be provided by one person, implementation will be taken care of by writing code and all, everything will be given to the other person. So there are 4 different tasks. There is a user story. That user story again we have divided into 4 different tasks. Each and every task is being allotted to a single person. So now we have to make sure 2 things. For example, user story interfaces I have given for Neeraja. 2 things I need to evaluate. First, how much time it will be taken to complete, means velocity, right? How much time it will be taken for us to complete this particular task. First of all, remember how much time it will be taken to complete this particular task to complete with, means I'm talking about the user interface. Second, what that member can capable of, means what Neeraja is capable of. Is she can complete this task within this timelines or not? So we have to see 2 things. One is actual time and actual effort which is required to complete that particular task has to be taken into account. Followed by this, whether are these people capable enough to complete this on time or not? Are they ready to take up the risk of completion this within these timelines or not? If not, are we required to divide into simplifying it? For example, Neeraja is the responsible person who will be creating user interfaces. So assume that user interface creation for login page taking 8 hours. 8 hours time. Are you giving 8 hours the full time to Neeraja to complete with? No, you're not giving. What you're doing, you're allocating 2 hours every day only for user interface designing to Neeraja. Remaining time we are allocating other tasks whichever is required for her and all, everything with other tasks. We are accompanying her with other tasks. So 2 hours is the time we are giving for every day, wherein it is taking 4 hours, 4 days time for Neeraja to complete user interfaces. Understood, right? So 8 hours, assume that 8 hours will be taken to complete user interface. 8 hours continues. If you are giving in one day, it will be over. Okay, in one day it will be over. We are not doing it. So what we are doing, we are minimizing into 2 hours time. Why are we giving 2 hours? Because every day there will be a meeting will be conducted. 24/7 customer collaboration and customer interaction will be there in the agile team. So we are not sure what kind of changes to be made, what kind of changes they're asking us to make out of it. Right? The priorities may get changed in between sometimes. The minor priorities I'm talking about. The major goal as well as the scope what we have defined, we don't compromise on it. But whatever is required and all everything in between, that make sure we have to do the kind of changes, whatever that the kind of priorities and all everything we have to keep in mind. So 2 hours of time every day, Neeraja is spending on user interfaces. At the same time, other people are also working on the same, so that she is completing this work in 4 days of time. Understood? Clear? Are you clear or not, Neeraja?
Yes,
Kajal,
it's clear.
Lindsay.
Yes, it's clear.
Are
Yes,
you
sir.
clear or not? So this is what generally we have to do it. So first of all, what we have to do, we have to divide user stories into tasks, and we have to make sure how much time this task can be completed with. Second, how much capacity and capability that respective individual can complete this task. Again, these two you are calculating And based on that, whatever the sprint goal we have, for example, if there is a sprint which should be completed in 2 weeks time, right? For example, there will be some sprints which we have to complete in 2 weeks time. So now you have to evaluate and you have to calculate, is it really capable enough for us to complete in 2 weeks time or not? For example, 8 hours in a day, 8 hours in a day for a person into 5 days in a week. 8 5s, 40 hours. 40 hours into 2 weeks. How much it is coming? 80 hours, right? 80 hours will be allotted for each and every individual who is working on the project. Means 80 hours is the time we are allocating. 80 hours is the time we are allocating for every person. So each and every hour is valuable. Each and every hour must be utilized. So we have to resource. Being a Scrum Master, that is your responsibility to get as maximum resource as you can within this 80 hours from those team members. That is what being a Scrum Master you must be good with. Okay, 80 hours per candidate for 2 weeks of sprint we are taking. So these 80 hours maximum performance or maximum work output you have to get from 80 hours of time. Understood? Clear? Everyone, right or not? For every person I'm saying, right? So again, this is purely depends on the kind of complexity what that particular work consists of. Because maybe a login page creation what we have taken looks maybe simple, but as far as the effort itself is concerned, we have to put effort double than the effort what we are keeping on the regular activity. So you have to make sure how much effort we have to keep on to complete this task within the stipulated timelines of 2 weeks which we have created. So understood? Clear? So user story creation and all everything we have taken. So we have to divide these tasks and all everything has to be taken into an account. The next, whatever the tasks we have taken, we need to identify what are all the tasks we have evaluated, and all these tasks were something connecting to the sprint goal what we have created or not, because there is a goal for the particular sprint was already created. Whatever the tasks we have allocated, is it capable by these team members to meet whatever the sprint goal which was created earlier? Are these people can capable enough to complete this or not? That being a Scrum Master, you must be very clear with. So why? Because each and every sprint will have a time box. 2 weeks of sprint. Reverse engineering, for example, 2 weeks of sprint you have given. If 2 weeks of sprint, how many hours of time we have, right? Those hours, assume that there are 80 hours we have given for each and every member. 80 hours into 5 members, how much it is coming? Around 400 hours, right? Or right? 80 hours into 5 members, sorry, 80 members into 5 members, right? 600 hours, right? 600 hours it will be. 600 hours of maximum utilization has to be made by the Scrum Master. Scrum Master must ensure all these 600 hours, whatever the 600 hours of time we have, 100% maximum utilization we have to use it. Within the 600 hours, you have to make sure you have to complete that sprint without having any kind of. Understand? Clear? Are you clear or not? Neerja, Lindsay, and
Clear.
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Just
Ajay.
one question I have.
How do we calculate that, right? How are we calculating, and how do we evaluating the hours, and how you are allocating task, on what basis calculation will be taken place? That I'll be explaining in tomorrow's session, right? How do we allocating? Because assume that I'm saying like 80 hours or time we are taking. So how we are allocating task based on the timelines what we have, that calculation part and all everything I'll be explaining in tomorrow's session. Clear? Clear, Nirja? Clear,
Yes, sir.
Kajal? Nancy? Right?
Okay.
Okay then. So we meet tomorrow and we discuss more further on this. See you there.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.